Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to set up our project in Godot for integration with the Gemini API. So we must have a version of Godot installed on our computer, or we're using the web version. And here we're going to launch the application, and we have to select a project name such as Godot Project with Gemini. We also have to create the project path, so you must have a folder as your project path, an empty folder that you create. Then in the project, we're going to create a new node and add a child node of HTTP request. You can have any kind of project here. On the root node, let's right-click, add a new script called Gemini.Godot script. Then we'll save the scene. So here we just have the default script that's created. And this is where we're going to implement the integration with Gemini. For now, we can just enter the ready function, and we can print out a statement such as hello world to make sure that the script is connected to a game object in the scene. Select a main scene and then play the game, and you'll see hello world printed in the output. This verifies that the script is connected to a game object. If you are not seeing this printed, make sure you saved all your files and make sure that you attached the script onto an object in the scene. Next up, we are going to take a look at a simple example of creating an HTTP request to an API, and then we'll dive into integrating the Gemini API. Previously, we created a new Godot project as well as a script attached to a game object. In this lecture, we are going to write out some code to perform a simple HTTP request. This way we can get familiar with performing HTTP requests in Godot. Join me back in your project and let's enter our script. Here we can see we're currently just printing a statement of hello world. But let's go into this script and add some more code. So inside of the ready function here, we're going to add the functionality that is called when the game begins. Instead of printing hello world, I'm going to instead use the HTTP request object that we attached to the scene. And I'm going to connect a function to run when a request is completed. And this will be called onRequestCompleted, so we have to define that function. This way, we can create some request and then do something with the response. For now, we'll just pass. Then in the ready function, we're going to grab HTTP request type again. This time, we're actually going to do a request. We have to pass in the URL of the API that we're using. Let's use the Godot engine GitHub page for the latest release for the Godot API. So we're actually connecting to the Godot API just for a simple demo. Then in onRequestCompleted, we have to pass in the result, the response code headers, as well as body as the arguments to the function. In the function, we're going to parse the body of the response. So we're going to grab the object, convert it to a string, then parse the string, and we can print out the JSON. So we get an object returned, and this just contains details about the GitHub repository. So this is an example of performing an HTTP GET request where you are getting data. Coming up next, we're going to perform an HTTP POST request, which is where you are sending data to an API. Because for a chatbot, we have to send a prompt and then get an answer to our prompt. So we've seen one example of an HTTP request, and let's look at a more complex example coming up next. Previously, we learned how to create an HTTP GET request in Godot. In this lecture, we're going to create a different type of request known as a POST request to send data to the Gemini API. Join me back in your project in your script. Here, we are going to replace some of the code that we have. So we're going to perform a request to a different API. First, we have to create a variable that is going to store our Gemini API key. You must create an API key for accessing the Gemini API. To do so, you will need a Google Cloud project. So you will need a Google Cloud account with billing enabled. Then at aistudio.google.com, you can create a new API key for Gemini in your Google Cloud project. Then paste that key in there. Then we will create a formatted string where we're going to enter in the Google Gemini API URL. We're using version 1 beta in this course. And into that string, we're going to add this placeholder where we're going to pass in the Gemini API key. Then we can take the format string and send in the API key to be into that formatted spot. That's because the Gemini API requires you to pass the API key directly in the URL. Each API is different. Then we'll create an object to store the JSON data, which for Gemini requires contents as a list of objects and parts as a list of objects all nested. Each part must contain text or whatever data you want to send to Gemini. In this case, we'll just do say hello. Then we're going to stringify the data. This will give us an object converted to a string. For the API, we also need to define headers. For the Gemini API specifically, we need to define the content type, which is application/JSON. The other values are passed in to the body. So in this case, we only actually have one header. Then we'll call request, and we are going to pass in the URL, headers, and the type, which is going to be method post, unlike the default, which was get. So we can also pass in the JSON, which is the data that we're sending. Then we can remove the line 28 where we previously made a request to the GitHub API, because this time we're making a request to the Gemini API instead, and it is a different type of request. Then in onRequestCompleted, we can keep that code to print the result. Now we can save our file and play our project. So here we get our result. We can see that we get this object with several fields, and these are specific to the Gemini API. In there includes the answer to our question or prompt, say hello. We see hello there, how can I assist you today? As well as other fields. Each API will return different fields in a different structure, just depending on how that API was set up. Just like that, we have integrated the Gemini API into Godot. So now you can integrate the chatbot responses into different areas of your games. Thanks for watching. Please share with us the creations that you make, and I hope to see you next time.